Hello, Sam coming at you. Today we're going to be going over refreshing OAuth 2.0 access credentials entirely in a StepZen GraphQL SDL. It's Sam. I got a haircut, so I'm looking new. I'm really excited to be able to show you guys what's going on in the StepZen world and being able to use Oauth Sequence in a really unique way to be able to handle OAuth, which is becoming a really, really awesome way of securely pinging authorization servers and being able to get applications access to resources. But it comes with a lot of difficulties when you're trying to actually maintain these. And a big reason of that is because there's expiration on these tokens that we usually get in OAuth 2.0. So today we're going to be going over in a really unique way in GraphQL SDL how to actually maintain these and keep a unique way of regenerating these and refreshing these whenever you have an endpoint at StepZen's, so you don't have to worry about going in there and continuously manually updating these when you want to be able to ping the resources server with a newly updated auth token. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. And I'm going to follow the same sequence that I did last time, where we'll be refreshing the OAuth. Well, no, we'll be going into the blog, and I will be showing you exactly how we do it through the blog that I wrote just a few days previous. I find it to be much faster this way. It's live coding, but it allows me to kind of just walk through it in a faster rate and talk through it a little bit more on how we do it. So getting set up StepZen, as you would know. So if you haven't done that, just go over. There's a sign up. It's free. It's awesome to try out. And it'll allow you to be able to create this SDL with me as we continue along. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is the hardest part, I would say, that I'm not going to show much of, but something that is a good practice to kind of get into is actually being able to actually set up your OAuth access and be able to initialize that authorization server and creating a third-party app that can actually ping your resources server. And a good example I found online, and maybe I can find it right now if we were to go HubSpot. No, we'll go OAuth 2.0, and then we'll see if we can kind of just get some good visuals on it. I've seen a little bit out there. So workflow, no, I don't like how some of these are, but you're essentially having an authorization server, and I like this one. This one's good. We'll go over and I'll talk alongside of this one. So you are the resources owner, and that's me. And let's say I own a HubSpot account. And today what we're going to be doing is creating a company using this OAuth sequence and being able to regenerate and constantly create a company in our HubSpot account. And the biggest thing is that we are the resource owner of that HubSpot account. And one thing we have to do is we have to provide access to a client application to be able to get access to our resources, which is our HubSpot account. And how are we going to do that for this client to be able to access that data? Well, we have to grant access to this client through our authorization server, which then can grant access to a client application, which is what is built into your OAuth sequence. So your OAuth sequence is essentially what is actually going to be pinging this authorization server and being able to then get that refresh token and that access token, which expires after a certain period of time, which is what we're going to be fixing today. And then it can actually access that data in your resources server, which is what essentially owns your companies, your contacts, workflows, everything that is in your CRM application of HubSpot. And then it allows you to delegate authentication authorization, which is really, it's just pinging authorization server and saying, can this client access this? Yes, it can. It can access that data as the resource server. So that's a really brief way of doing it. Some of them actually show examples in a lot more detail, which is the ones I probably skipped over because they seem a lot at once. Shows how eventually it expires. You then have to go back and use that refresh token after a certain amount of time to be able to get access to the new access token that has now been generated. And a big way that that's done is, I won't look at any more of these, but a big way that's done is you have a redirect that you have to be able to go to. So you then have a client ID that you'll be given and a redirect URI, and then the scopes that you want to be able to give this application. So your app now has a client ID that's going to be associated with an authorized redirect URL, which in this case, we would say like StepZen, and it allows you to be able to get access to that that code that is provided. And so when you are given that code on a redirect, it's the first step, and essentially the first step to pinging an authorization server and saying, hey, I was redirected by this third-party app to be able to get my code so that now I can go get my access token. And if everything works out there, it's a step that you can follow the docs right here that HubSpot provides. And they're really straightforward. They're really awesome. And they provide everything better, probably than even I can, obviously, because they're the one that built it out for you. same kind of specs that you'll be needing, and it allows you to then be able to go in, and this is a good example that they provide. You'll be able to go in later and get that code that they're going to be asking here, and they're showing an example being able to use it on a node to be able to use, I think, Express right here to be able to grab that. And then you'll be provided the code, and then the next step you actually will have is you'll be getting that access token using that code that was provided by the redirect. And I think if we go down a little bit farther, provides a good example. Maybe I skipped over it. Refreshing, so it shows that part. The initial one that we're going to be wanting to go for, I believe, is the redirect. No, that's not it. But I have an example here. And so this is kind of what it is. Pull this up. You can see you're going to be wanting to get that initially with that new code that's generated. Oh, so that was it. Okay, you continue to use the redirect URI that's provided in there. But really, you're going to have the grant type as authorization code that's in there, client ID, client secret now that's been provided for that third-party application to be able to get access to the resources server. And then what you get in response to that is going to look something like this. And you're going to get token type, bear, refresh token, access token, and the amount of time that expires, which in this case is 6 hours right there. I believe that's in milliseconds you're going to have right there. So first thing we're going to do is now we're going to actually go out, and what we're going to do is we're going to get this exact response every single time in our GraphQL SDL. And the first step to being able to do that is to create our project that will be doing that. So we'll bounce over, and I think I have the code open over here, if I'm not right. Yes. So I just created it. So you can just make it. I think I made it my desktop. If I were to check that out real quick. Documents. Okay. So I just created that, and then I went right into it, and I CD'd. The reason I did that was because all I wanted to do was put in this config.json early on, in case if I forgot, because it'll give me a predisposed endpoint, and it'll allow me to tell StepZen exactly where I want to put the endpoint by having this config.json. So when we run it, StepZen start, we'll be able to, it'll run this endpoint, as we can see right here. So next step we'll have is we want to get that config.yaml with all the needed IDs. And what we're going to be having here is the same exact kind of keys that we saw up here earlier. And in a really small little thing right there, which I'll pull up over here, you're going to have the grant type, client ID, client secret, redirect URI. So these three right here, we're going to be providing directly within it the config.yaml, so that it'll be able to just generate it every single time with the SDL provided. So heading back over, we'll copy that over, and we'll create a config.yaml. And I am going to pull this over here, and then I will punch those in real quick. So ignore me for just a second as I put those in. And all this is when you have a config.yaml, it's a good way of hiding your secrets. We've probably discussed it before. So you know exactly what's going to be pulled in, and we'll be using it the same way as you would arguments. They pull in the same way as a variable that you would arguments into a standard query or mutation. You can do the same thing with your config.yaml variables that we'll be punching in there. So now that I have those set up there, I will be throwing that back down for us to be able to continue on our project. And I'll punch this here. Awesome. So let me pull you guys back up in case if any questions pop up. So next step is we're going to do exactly what we just saw on being able to get that exact response of token type, refresh token, access token, and the expiration. So that's just the type that we're going to declare in our GraphQL SDL. Just copy that. And we're going to create a HubSpot.GraphQL. And then what I'm going to do is, in this case, for the demo, I'm going to mock it. So you'll see the exact same stuff. If you were to run this yourself, you'd see very similar codes coming back as I showed you in the demo there that we had on the blog. But for this case, the mock will provide lower ipsum. So we'll see something a little bit different. But as you can see, we have the client ID, client secret, and refresh token just going on as URL encoded content types directly at the endpoint of OAuth token. Similar to how we had in Postman, we're doing the same thing here to an at-rest directive, which is provided by StepZen, that allows us to behave exactly as we did with the same post request that we had in Postman to get the exact same fields in response that we would expect when we're trying to ping and focus on this, the authorization server. So this is not the resources server. that we're going to be picking here. This is authorization. So right here, this is our third-party app saying, hey, here's my client ID, client secret, and what else did I have there? Refresh token, obviously. Refresh token that was provided from the first time we asked for it in Postman and we tested it out. We were able to grab that refresh token, and now we're able to say, okay, here it is. We're going to be doing it the exact same way with a refresh token grant type this time around, so that we can continuously get that over and over again for whenever we want to be able to generate anything in the resources server that will then be pinging second in a sequence, which we'll be getting to. So without further ado, I think we just need to create an index GraphQL, and I might be getting ahead of myself, but if we come over, so what it's really saying here, and I kind of just gave a little iteration of what's going on when creating a REST directive from the get auth query, we're adding some additional parameters. So really we're adding method and content type, and content types, obviously you can have application JSON, you can have application URL form encoded. Big part is just telling it how we're going to actually be sending the resources over to the server. We want to be able to do that post request. And this is a big part that our team has actually been talking about, is if you're familiar with REST APIs, and I've even told people as this for an easy way of understanding how queries and mutation work in GraphQL. If you're familiar with REST, you would then associate post entirely with a mutation. And like I said, I did too. But the biggest thing is that if you are sending a mutation, you are mutating data and modifying data of some sort on the server that you're hitting. And so in this case, we actually decided we want to go with query. And the reason we went with that is because it just makes a little bit more sense, even though it's still a post request. Post came before REST. And a post is, we are not really mutating data in this regard. We're really just sending them our credentials of what we have, and we're getting resources in response without modifying any data. Really, the only thing we are kind of modifying is we're updating and refreshing for a new token, but we aren't actually changing any data on their end. They're just providing more credentials to our client that we're sending over to them, so that we can later on mutate data on the resources server. So think of it more as we're separating authorization server with resources server in this regard. And a query will be done to the authorization server unless if we're truly modifying data in that server, and maybe the way we actually have to send data to do that. But we won't be doing that in this case. So we're just querying for the new access token every single time. And like I said, and our team has said earlier, posts, get, put, delete came before REST. So really to associate the two entirely as post equals mutation and get equals query is not correct, because that's the REST way of thinking it. And post can be much more than that. And post can behave in both manners of query and mutation. So StepZen's, when we write out our directives, we kind of think of it that way too. And I hope that helps a little bit. We still talk about that and discuss that to this day. But it kind of makes sense when you think about it in that regard and what you're truly doing with the data. So I'm going to copy this right here, and it seems like it's having a little bit of lag. So I'll just write schema right on top. It's catching. So, and then we'll just punch that over, one over. Should still behave the exact same. And start. So what's happening here is, it's looking for HubSpot sequence. Okay. So if we go to here, so we're just going to be naming this config. So you can name it whatever you want in your configuration. In my config.yaml, I named it as config in there. So you can name it as sequence config. You can name that configuration whatever you want. I was naming it sequence as an example prior. So really all we're doing here is just tying it in with the credentials that are coming over from our client IDs, secrets, and so forth. So now we have local open. So if we were to come over and refresh here, should see our Explorer, which is just a standard graphical Explorer, get auth, and just to confirm, there's mock here. So if we were to run this and try to get just these two first, should see random data. So if we were to continue on our journey, get random data here, but it's going to be the same exact pattern if you were to remove that at mock, and I'll show how this works earlier or later as the data that you would see here. So every single time this won't change because this is always your refresh token that you provide when you want to be able to regenerate and refresh that access token. But the access token changes every single time and expires in that time frame. So that is a get auth, and we've discussed this, I think, in enough detail. So we'll head right back over and we'll continue on to actually writing out our first company create. So our first mutation that we're going to be going over. And right now, this is pretty much the standard file structure that we have going on. That's what you would actually see coming in response when you're looking for those kind of things. So create a HubSpot company with the @sequence directive. So we're just going to copy this, and I'll provide a little bit of context as to what's going on there. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just organize my types. And I'll zoom in a little bit because I feel like everybody always says I need to have it a little bit smaller. So we'll just slide this up here so we can keep all of our types up here. So I just added a little bit of context on this one. Properties, associates, and modifications of a company. These are just the fields that we're looking for. But one thing I noticed that we're going to have here is domain name and description. And the way I was able to pull those up was by naming the setters. So what we're doing here is by specifying the actual types of properties that we want to be able to see when we're pinging for a company and creating a company. We just have to work kind of down the path of that JSON that we get in response and tell it exactly where. And this is all part of the StepZen @rest directive. We provide setters as a way of telling StepZen, okay, where to look for this exact field and to where to work down the tree that's been provided to us. And if you tell them exactly where that path is of the tree of the JSON response that's coming back from that @rest, we can then associate that field with the top level parent type, which in this case is your HubSpot company. And it still uses the method post, obviously. And then the only difference here is we're actually adding a post body, which is just sending over the individual resources and telling it exactly what we're going to be specifying and sending to this resources server so that we can create the company. So in this case, we're going to be sending over the same arguments that we have here of access token, which is going to be coming from the get auth. And then the next step is name, description, and domain. So those are the 4 arguments that are coming in. Name, description, and domain are 3 of the actual properties that we're going to be giving to the company that we're now creating inside of HubSpot, whereas the access token is just the authorization to be able to do so. So we're just kind of sending it over as a header, but it's still used as an argument in this STL so that we can pass that through in the @sequence that we're going to be doing. So that's about it here. And as you can see, that access token is not going to be going in that post body to create the company. It's going to be going in as a header value right here as a bearer token. So I'll save that. And then, so now that we understand what that's doing, if we were to remove if we were to provide access token individually, we'd be able to see that we could create a company. But for time's sake, we're just going to kind of continue on with the @sequence and be able to kind of show how we can tie these two together. So, and yeah, gave that whole context right there as to what's going on. So now we're going to actually create the sequence of what's going to be happening when we actually want to be able to get that off and create the company following with the authorization that we were asking for with the access token. So context given here, this is a good way of commenting, which is a practice we're starting to implement more and more at StepZen to be able to show how we actually want to create information throughout an STL so that when you are provided the STL, you know kind of what's going on a little bit more. They use a 3 quote on top, and you can also do the hashtag pound key to be able to provide those as well. So this is also going to be going in your mutation file because this is going to be behaving as a mutation. So we just named this one create company with token. So it's a combination of the 2 we saw previous. And when we combine the 2, this is the second directive that we're bringing into StepZen, to where at first we had @rest, and we're using those for both the get auth and the HubSpot create company. And now we're going to bring in the @sequence directive that's going to be using both of those @rest points and actually sequentially bringing both of those in one after another with 2 steps provided. So it's going to first go query, get the auth, and then second step is write the mutation of creating the company with the provided authorization token coming down. So as you can see here, the biggest thing that's going on is we're still going to be naming them, right? Because when we write out this mutation, we want to specify the name, description, or domain every single time as the argument. Say we're on a front end, and whenever someone wants to create a company on your other platform in HubSpot, which may be a use case that I'm sure is all the time out there, they want to be able to specify that every single time and maybe unique to each individual one. So these aren't defaults, so they have to be arguments in this mutation. So what we have to do is, those aren't arguments in our query, they're going to be arguments in our mutation. So we just have to tell the StepZen directive right here that we need to name as the argument that we have specified here as name. So I didn't name them differently, but and I'm using the word name while describing this, but that's what's happening here, is that you have the argument name going on right up here in your properties that we're looking for. And we have specified with context clues in HubSpot create company. And so as we can see, we have it highlighted here. We then want the argument name to be carried on and provided in here. And it's not going to be looking for that in a field with getAuth. So getAuth is not returning that to us. GetAuth, if we come up here, is returning auth. So if we head up to auth, we can see that's not a field here. So if we weren't to specify that we're looking for that in argument, it's going to look for it as a field in that sequence, and it's not going to find it, and it's going to throw us an error saying we couldn't find name, and we couldn't find description, and we couldn't find domain of the company that you're trying to write as an argument to HubSpot create company, which is your mutation. And what we're doing here is we're saying don't look for it as a field. You're only looking for access token as a field, so that we can provide that as our fourth argument to a bearer, so that we can actually get access to that resources server. We are going to be specifying that as an argument. So I think I've beaten that to a pulp, and it's at an understanding now. So we're going to head back down, and we're going to save that. And we shouldn't get any errors. We have HubSpot company already created. So it's going to be using the same exact type to be able to create it as we would expect, because at the last stage of the mutation, we want to be able to return all the fields that we would expect from creating a company. So now that we have the sequence ready to rock, I say we go ahead and we test this out. And mutation, my mutation, let's create it right here. And if we refresh, as you can see, mutation popped up immediately. But if you don't have it preset, you can always just go down here. You can change between query and mutation. And then if you already have one up and then you were to decide to add query, it'll add both of them. So you can have both specified. You just have to then describe which one you actually want to run. So we're going to run this right now, and it's going to fail. Why did it fail? Oh, it's not authorized. So now we know that because of the example that we're providing, it failed, and we didn't have authorization to the server with the bearer token. Now, why is that? Well, because I didn't change at mock. So now we know that the data is actually using this access token that's been provided by the first step of getAuth right here. So it's actually going to be passing that access token that'll be provided in our header value, which is then going up into our HubSpot company that we would provide. So now that we can remove that at mock, it should work. Deployed, head back over, my mutation. Amazing. Company's created. You can see that we already had the specs already, the description of the new company, example.com, and then example company. So this is all just dummy data that I provided for us to be able to see kind of what's coming back in the example that we have of the company being created in this, what they call a developer account that you can create at HubSpot. And it allows you to just test all the data out. It gives you all the same authorizations that an enterprise would have. So it's really good for testing, and it allows you to build out OAuth and use your API key in either way to be able to do those things. So that's really it. That was the short of the demo. There wasn't too much to this. It was really just showing a way of passing an access token that's constantly refreshed over and over again, so that you don't have to worry about actually regenerating that every single 6 hours and going in and updating your StepZen endpoint to query with the new access token that's been provided. And if you were to forget in 6 hours, you fell asleep, you didn't set your alarm, you know that the data would still be able to create a company if someone were to do that on your platform it would run every single time because you always have a new access token being provided and updated while you're wanting to run any mutation on your StepZen endpoint. So it's really cool. It's really neat. And it shows the power of being able to use @sequence in perfection. It immediately will be able to do step 1 and step 2 sequentially so that you don't have to worry about anything happening. And there's no latency. It's asynchronous, but it definitely still runs it in a very, very fast speed and allows you to be able to get all the data that you need from that specific type of the company that then has just been created in HubSpot. So really quick, I'll just look to the screen, see if anyone has any questions. If we don't, then we can show a third step to be able to refresh an OAuth 2.0 access token. I don't know if you could hear that horn. Okay, awesome. No questions, I don't think. Still looking around. All right. So I'm going to go back in and we'll be able to kind of show a third step to this. So the biggest thing is that now we have created a access token that pings the authorization server and says, hey, I want to be able to get a new access token with the refresh token that I've provided for my third-party app. Can you give me the access token that I can use for the next 6 hours? It goes, yes, you can absolutely use that. And it goes, here you go. Here's your access token coming back in that type that we want of authorization. And then we go, thank you very much. That's great. Really happy that we can be provided that because we are immediately going to use it in the sequential directive called @sequence and provide that as a argument, but it's coming from a field in our create company with token so that that argument can be tied in with the name, description, and domain that then all goes together in our last step of HubSpot create company and ties in all those individual arguments with a method post and hits that endpoint, gets the process going, and then is able to bring back the type, scroll up here, HubSpot company with company ID. If it was deleted, which is not, it was just created. If it has any additional domains, does not, we didn't send that. We can provide the domain, the name, the description. So it brings back everything that we would expect when we want to be able to ping those kinds of endpoints. So we'll go into the last step here and we'll kind of show a third step on what we can do with this. And I call this adding the search mutation. So HubSpot actually has a search functionality, but it behaves as a post. So that's also a good example of showing that not everything that just involves purely fetching data needs to be a GET request when it comes to REST 2. This one, in fact, doesn't send any data except for saying, hey, we're looking for all the companies that are associated with domain X. And in this case, it'll be example.com. Well, there's no issue with that at all, but you just need to do it as a post request. And then we'll be able to retrieve all of those domains that you're looking for. And there may be more than one company associated with a domain. So we'll be able to show how that can actually come back in a retrieval process. And it still runs it as a mutation here because we need to be able to provide a post body associated with that. So it shows that really it's just you have to think about it as what are we doing with the data? What are we actually going and getting? And in this regard, we're going to be actually searching for a domain. And we need to actually provide a post body of saying what we want the request options to be with the properties associated. So we're going to be sending that post directly underneath our create as a mutation. So now we have that there, search companies by domain. And as you can see, there's only 2 arguments going into this one, same access token that we were provided earlier. So that's going to continuously just going down the train step by step. And it'll go, okay, get auth, provide the access token, create the company. Okay, provide the auth now to search companies by domain. And now let's just actually get the domain of all the companies that have been created. And how are we going to get those domains? The same way we did with the access token, we're going to be getting it from HubSpot company. So you have auth providing access token as a field. Now we're going to have HubSpot company providing domain as a field. And that'll be the argument that'll go into our third step to search by domain. So we create that company and then immediately we'll be able to see, okay, I just created a company. I want to make sure, say someone says to you, I want to make sure that there's no other companies that are created in here with the same domain. Or I want to be able to see, are there multiple companies? You know, there's a lot of sub organizations within a larger domain, I want to see what other companies are associated when I create this company. I just want to be able to understand by this domain how many companies there are in our individual HubSpot account. So that's what this will provide you right away, immediately upon creating the company. So we can save that or not. We can actually just come over and we'll just create that last sequence. And I'm keeping both in because both can be supported. It's not like you have to completely throw away one of your sequences when you create another one. I'm just going to add this as a different one, and it's called search companies with OAuth. So now we have supported both, and there's no issue with doing that. So going into here, we'll drop that in, and now we have search companies with OAuth. And we are going to save it. And what you can see here is we're still providing the same 3 arguments of name, description, and domain. And the biggest thing with this is every single time when we want to be able to create these, we don't want to specify just the domain and now we have to drop the name and description because we have the search at the end. We want to be able to still have those 3 arguments only influence the creation of a company. And then when we search for it, we'll just use the field of the domain from the created then company that came back as a response in our third process of HubSpot search companies by domain. So if that didn't make sense, it's really awesome though. But it's really interesting how you can specify exactly where you want the arguments of your sequential mutation and what step you want it to actually influence. And other than that, it's just going to be looking for fields within a response and using those to continue on with the arguments that they have in each individual mutation or query to get you the data that you need. And then you can just continue on and on and on. And then whenever you want to specify the argument to actually influence that mutation or query in the step, you can do so. You just need to tell it right here within arguments. So now that we have it all done, we want to be able to return a list of companies by domain. So if we go and create the same exact company now, right here, we'll actually, we'll see. I think I saved it. We'll come in, and this time I'll just add these individually so you can kind of see what's going on. And as you can see, search companies with OAuth at first wasn't recognized, but now I think it's not going to have an issue. So maybe we need to refresh. Maybe I do need to save them. No, so let's check. Search companies with OAuth. So let's come in here. Now it's going to open up and wants to have me input it all over again. We'll just do this and we get one more in here. And then we'll just go company ID. Oh, all right, hold on. I'm going to pop back over. Show a little bit more of the workflow. So I'm going to pick a few. So I just wanted to talk through it. So we know that name's going to be coming in. And the biggest thing is we know the description, but the biggest thing is that domain. So that field that we're going to be asking for right here, we need to have that in response, and we need to be able to actually see that generated so that when we have that company that's being created, we know that the domain will be passed with that step from 2 to 3 where the company is being created. Okay, we need the domains associated with all the companies, and we need to be able to search that. Boom, it'll throw it in and get you the next one. So this is really all you need to be able to see what's going on. So we will search it. And there we are. We can see that we now have 2 companies. We created one, and now we just created another. So what happened here was we got the get off query that was run, and it was able to provide us with a newly refreshed access token. And then that access token was provided to the HubSpot create company that you can see right here. And the create company then took these 3 arguments and provided that in the post body and wrote a mutation that was able to create this new company over here with a newly associated company ID. And we provided the same exact names as we would expect in the original. But this time we were able to keep it because HubSpot lets you create it regardless of there being duplicates. And the third one, we wanted to say, okay, now we want to be able to get that domain, example.com, and search for it all throughout HubSpot to see if any companies have duplicate domains, if there's any that are pre-existing. And as we can see here, we get a list back saying, yes, there are more than one. we have multiple companies in here that are associated with example.com. And we now can go into our HubSpot account and say, okay, why do we have 2 of these? Do we need 2 of these? We're able to see that immediately. And it's a fun little example just showing how you can ask for data, check data, and get access tokens throughout that entire process to be able to constantly regenerate and refresh. A really, really solid and secure way of having 2 different servers of authorization and resource, but to make it a lot easier in your application workflow that happens entirely on the back end and is all handled within StepZen's. So we didn't see the access token the entire time throughout this process. And it was really, really secure on being able to make sure that the data is modified and updated and continuously updated for days on end without having to worry about refreshing that token at any time or exposing it on a front end for any means and having to pass it between servers other than our own. So it's a really solid way of being able to sequentially get all this different data and mutate all this different data on different servers and ping them both, and it comes at you pretty fast. So, I mean, if we were to do this again, we would just have 3. And so on and so forth. And it just continuously creates new companies, and it's showing that it's constantly generating these every time. Then we're just searching for it. So if we were to go into our HubSpot account, and let me just make sure, pull that in, you'd be able to see that we have 3 in here. We're going to pull this down. Just for proof that it's not mock data right here. Here's my little dummy one that I had here. See that it's a developer test account, and we have 3 example companies provided. They were all changed at this time today at 336, 334, 324. So if we're to create another one, refresh, we have another one that just came in just a minute later. So it happens just like that. And every single time you're able to check, and then we're able to come in and say, okay, let's just delete these. And it works the same as if you were to just search for companies right here. It does the same exact thing. And we're just doing that entirely through an API to be able to capture that data. And that's about it. This is a really cool SDL. It's all on the blog. You'll be able to copy all of this code right here and be able to use it for your own purposes. We're supporting a lot in HubSpot. It's been a really exciting process to be able to do that and showing all the capabilities of it. And let me pull you guys up. See if you have any questions. No questions. I think it's a day where it's a really cool project on a really cool blog, but it's a nice Friday, at least here in Florida. So I hope we get to show this example in a way to where it sparks other ideas and allows people to want to think of writing other sequences to be able to generate data and be able to pass data throughout their queries and mutations, all within an SDL, and show the capabilities of being able to use all these different directives and the way at GraphQL, a GraphQL endpoint, REST endpoint, a database, all these different directives can all be influenced and brought in on a sequence. I today only provided at REST, but just showing the capabilities of how they can all influence and all be written as either queries or mutations in a GraphQL SDL is really something powerful that I hope it sparks and causes more thoughts on how it can really empower your applications. So without further ado, I think I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for watching. And yeah, it was a great time. Thanks.